Hey, hi, hello, welcome. This video is gonna be a little bit different than the rest that I have on my channel. Actually, it's gonna be a lot different. You see, a few days ago, I was watching a few videos on YouTube that speculated about where different games in a franchise would relate to each other, geographically speaking. Some of the most prevalent ones of this genre that I saw were Zelda and Pokemon. I feel like each time there's a new game in the Zelda franchise, people try to say where it is in relation to the past games. This is especially true ever since Nintendo released that Zelda timeline. That's not very accurate, but whatever. People also like to look at the Pokemon regions like Johto and Sinnoh and Unova and all the rest and try to figure where they would fit on a globe. While I was watching these videos, it occurred to me, there's not too many videos out there trying to speculate about where these fictional worlds would be on our actual real-life globe. This idea seemed like a perfect one for me to tackle, as I'm a huge geography/map nerd. In order to do this though, there are two key factors we need to look at: geography and climate. These two things are fundamental to describing any place on Earth. So in theory, if we can find a correlation in these three areas between our world and the fictional world, we could say pretty definitively that that's where it would be if it were real. As I'm sure you can tell from the title and all the footage that's been going on in the background, we're gonna be looking at Hyrule. So let's just pull up its map and oh boy. Okay, this is gonna be a problem. The land of Hyrule is very unique. You have a tropical forest next to a barren desert, next to a frozen tundra, next to an active volcano. All of these aren't necessarily issues so long as Hyrule is big enough to... oh crap. Okay, cool. I guess Hyrule is only 80 square kilometers? I'll link the website I'm using to get this information down in the description below, but you don't just have to take my word for it. I'm gonna also link down in the description below a couple of other resources I used of other people trying to figure out how big Breath of the Wild's Hyrule is. There's one in particular that I'm gonna use, and it's a post from Stack Exchange. Now on this post, user Overlord tries to figure out how big Breath of the Wild is in real life units. The way they did this is with a minigame. The paragliding minigame, I'm sure many of you know about it. Now the whole point of this minigame is you just try to paraglide as far as possible. And you guessed it, it shows how far you go in meters. By playing this minigame, Overlord was able to calculate that Breath of the Wild's Hyrule is about 84 square kilometers. And that's great, but it's actually a post on this thread that got me to my own conclusion. A second user that goes by the name of Chubbybub posted about a Breath of the Wild object map. This map is really cool, you guys should go check it out, I'll link it down below. But basically, it uses real life units, the meters that we saw before in the minigame, to calculate distance. If we do what Chubbybub did, we can see that Breath of the Wild's Hyrule is about 10 kilometers by 8 kilometers, making for a pretty even 80 square kilometers. And that is absolutely nuts. Okay, let me show you just how nuts that is. Hyrule could fit into New York City 6 times and London 12. The country of Liechtenstein is twice that size, and Liechtenstein is tiny. So we're not working with a lot of land area here, and that's gonna complicate things. You're not gonna find such diverse climate and geography in such a small area. It's just not gonna happen. Now, just a little disclaimer here. That totally makes sense from a developing standpoint. You don't want to make a game that's absolutely massive, because then your character's just gonna be running around for hours on end. Thankfully for us though, that's really not gonna be that big of an issue. While it would admittedly have been very cool to look at all of Hyrule, we can still just look at individual regions. Hebra, Eldin, Gerudo, Faron, and Central Hyrule, of course, all have their own kind of ecosystem, if you will. So let's just take it one region at a time. For this video, I wanted to focus on Gerudo, specifically the Gerudo Desert and the Gerudo Highlands. Let's talk about geography first. I think that'll be the easier of the two. The Gerudo Desert region, of course, is going to be pretty easy. It's characterized by sand.
I don't like sand.
With one distinct oasis, of course, being Gerudo Town. Now the Highland region, oh boy, the Highlands can be a little bit harder. This area is filled with peaks, plateaus, mesas, buttes. The last of those three, interesting enough, are actually really just the same thing, just on a different scale. A butte is just a smaller mesa, and a mesa is just a smaller plateau. But anyways, let's get into the weeds. The main thing you need to take away from this is there are peaks and there are lots of tall, flat-topped monuments. Also a canyon pass making for easier access in and out of the region. Also, you're going to find some very bright redstone, which is just beautiful to look at. Looking at the real world, there are parts that match this description. Areas like the Sahara Desert or parts of southern Utah fit very well into these categories. But after spending entirely too long on Google Earth, I've decided that the best fit for this is the Gobi Desert and the Taklamakan Desert. Let me show you guys why I think this. We'll start in the Taklamakan area, and I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. This area in particular, you come here, tons of sand everywhere, you go up a little bit, and you find this oasis area. Lots of greenery, lots of water obviously. If you look a little bit above that, you see mountain peaks, and on those peaks, lots of snow. To be honest, I struggled a bit trying to find the geographic features like mesas, plateaus, and buttes. And that's why I incorporated the Gobi Desert. This area has a lot of those features. Also in the Gobi Desert is this beautiful area known as the Flaming Cliffs. Now if we look at it, it's pretty easy to see that it's just a bunch of bright red cliffs with flat tops. So yeah, I'd feel pretty comfortable saying that it's somewhere within Mongolia and China. But remember, this is just the geography. We still have one other thing to look at, which is to evaluate its climate, we're going to use something you might remember from school. It's called the Köppen Climate Classification System. While it is a mouthful, it's very useful for this kind of thing. This system looks at an area's climate and classifies it into 5 different subcategories. They are tropical, arid, temperate, continental, and polar. I really don't know why they didn't make it D for dry and C for continental, but what are you going to do? To make these classifications, there's a large emphasis put on temperature and precipitation. Temperature's the easy one. To get this information, I played for a very long time and just went around these 2 regions collecting data using the gauge that the game gives you. Doing this, I was able to find the temperature range for both of these areas. And of course, I took both day and night into consideration. I found the Highlands to range anywhere between -20 degrees Celsius and 35 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, the desert's range was between -5 and 55 degrees Celsius. Now, disclaimer here, anybody who has played this game knows that that temperature gauge is not perfect. It caps out at -20 and only goes above 55 degrees Celsius if you're like on fire. Which, I mean, let's be fair, if it was 55 degrees Celsius outside, you'd probably feel like you were on fire. And believe it or not, that's all we're gonna need for temperature. It might not be perfect, but it's gonna work for what we need it for. Okay, precipitation. This is the one I said was going to be difficult, and here's why. Koppen like to separate this section into seasons, which are non-existent in this game. If you leave your game on, it's just going to run through the same day and night cycle. The only real noticeable difference is, of course, the blood moon. That's not the only obstacle we're going to run into. Oh no. This system also likes to look at quantity of precipitation received, which makes sense. But until somebody can mod in a rain catcher for this game, I don't see any way of calculating quantity. Instead of driving myself nuts and probably getting stuff wrong, I'm just gonna embrace it. And so we're just gonna do some ocular science. By just walking around the region, you can tell already in the desert, there's just no rain. There might be a caveat to this, maybe it's just a really low percentage chance, but for all the time I've played, I've never seen rain here. Let me know if you guys have ever seen rain in the desert. Now the Highlands region, that place has quite a bit of precipitation, comparatively, which, let's be honest, is not hard to do. The snow there is very prevalent and can get very deep in some areas. Also, one kind of weird thing that I thought was pretty interesting is you can actually find some rain here. It's in just this one specific spot on the very bottom right. Not really groundbreaking news, but I thought it was kind of cool. So we've done our field research, we've done our ocular science. Let's take what we know and try to figure out where this would be classified. Right off the bat, I feel pretty comfortable calling this Group B. This particular group, as you can probably tell from the name, is saved for regions with very little precipitation, which this is a part of. Now some of you may be calling me out saying, but the Highlands does have a lot of precipitation, and yeah, to be fair, that's right. But I didn't want to break these up too much, and so I decided just to take the average, and kind of balancing it out, it's a dry area. If you feel differently though, I can totally see where it's coming from. Going forward from here, there are 2 more subgroups that we can classify this area into. Desert or steppe, and hot or cold. The desert versus steppe is a closer look at precipitation, while the hot versus cold is a closer look at exactly what it sounds like. For the first of these, I'm gonna go ahead and give it the dub, standing for, of course, you guessed it, desert. Whereas the desert has literally no precipitation, It doesn't seem fair to call it a semi-arid region. Plus, if you look up pictures of steppes on Google, this just ain't it. The last subcategory that we're gonna look at is hot versus cold. The way this is calculated has changed over the years. Originally, it was based entirely off of latitude. What's more popular nowadays, though, is to look at the average temperature for the coldest month. If that average temperature is above 0 degrees Celsius, then it's called hot. If it's below 0 degrees Celsius, then it's called cold. Looking at both of these areas, the desert and the highlands, it's pretty easy to call this one cold. Now, I know the desert has a huge 55 degrees Celsius temperature range, but it's important to note that it does get down to -5 at night. The Highlands region just pushes us over into cold. And there you have it. Using the Koppen climate classification system, we have determined that the Gerudo region is a BWk. Now, if that means as little to you as to me when I first found this out, here's a map showing similar BWk regions in the globe. If you look closely, you can actually see that parts of the Taklamakan and Gobi Desert are included in this classification. So that's the last bit of evidence we need. This really helps confirm what we found out earlier. If real-life Gerudo is on your bucket list, you tolerate heat a heck of a lot better than I do. But also, now you know where it would be. Thank you guys so much for watching. I had a lot of fun putting this video together, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. We'll go ahead and look at another region of Hyrule in a future video, and I hope to see you guys there.